Now, Michael Verney is with us to talk about the hurling at the weekend. Michael, good morning to you. How are you?
Gentlemen, how are we?
Not only that, previewing Punchestown today in the jack of so many trades. Only Fools and Horses fan, snooker fan.
Yeah, I was expecting you to greet me with an alright, Marco.
Yeah, loves the darts. All rounder really.
Yeah. Sure, listen, you have to have many coals in the fire, don't you?
Is it 20-1 Willie Mullins for winning more than 12, or is it more than 16 great Group 1s this week? There's a headline in one of the papers today.
Yeah,
unparalleled, unprecedented levels of domination, even by his standards.
Yeah, it's outrageous. I think it was 33-1 from to win the 12 Grade 1s this week. He probably won't, but he probably won't be a million miles off. He'd probably hit double figures anyway. It's a mad week. He'd 19 winners, I think, 2 years ago. He'd probably hit 15 or 16 this week. It's nuts, really.
It's down to 20-1. That's according to the Times.
Are you there this week, Michael?
I am indeed, John.
It's not the worst job the sports journalist to be going from like high profile Gaelic games a weekend and into Punchestown and back again the following weekend. Could be worse.
Good time of the year, in fairness.
Well, it's like this. I thought he was getting the short straw. I've been sent to O'Connor Park for the footballers the other day, and I tell you, that was one of the great days. It was a brilliant day, and it's probably a little bit unexpected. And I was
long live the Provincial Championship.
Yeah, well, I tell you something, and it's weird because our semi-final has potential ramifications for Cork and Kildare as well. So I think it's an unintended consequence of the provincial championships now that other people are looking over their shoulders thinking if X or Y wins here, we could be in the Tailteann Cup. So it is definitely made things a bit more interesting. But funnily enough, it's nearly the early stages that make it more interesting. The finals probably won't be as maybe worthwhile or as meaningful as some of the earlier games.
On that point, right, this is the time of the year where we get to have these conversations about the tune-up that is the Leinster Hurling Championship, particularly for Kilkenny and potentially Galway this year. Let's wait and see how Dublin recover from the draw up in Belfast. Meanwhile, the bear pit that is the Munster Hurling Championship is going to eradicate two of the best teams in the country from All-Ireland contention. It does feel as if maybe we could revisit this a little bit.
Yeah, well, if you were picking a top 7 in the country, 5 of them are definitely going to be from Munster, realistically, and Kilkenny and Galway are going to be thrown in whatever order you want. It could be second or third, it could be third and fourth, it could be fourth and fifth or whatever, but Munster are definitely going to have 5 of those top 7, and it's a situation where Kilkenny can ease TJ Reid back into action. I know they're playing Galway this weekend and he won't be eased in this weekend, but you can there's games in Leinster where you can afford to give guys game time. You do not get that luxury in Munster at all. As you say, it's a bear pit, a shark tank. You're going in, if you lost last weekend, you're under serious pressure going in this weekend, and it's a bit skewed. The only thing is about the provincials in hurling and football, the Munster hurling title still has so much standing, and the final last year would tell you exactly what it meant to the two teams involved. It's still huge to win Munster. It's still big to win Leinster, but not as big as Munster. So until that's somewhat degraded, I'm not sure when that change is going to come, because it is a massive, the Munster teams would see winning Munster as the second biggest thing that we can do this year.
I buy that, right, and down to the point where if Clare had won last year, Brian Lohan, his job would be safe for another 5 years after that. But there is a bit where at some point somebody in Munster is going to realise that some team is going to go out having maybe drawn 2 matches, 1-1, and still you're not in the All-Ireland series. Whereas in this year, for example, it could be a mediocre Dublin or a mediocre Wexford team, given their injuries, and caveating that with the injuries that they have, and it's obviously an evolutionary Dublin team, are going to be in an All-Ireland series, and that's just not fair.
Yeah, listen, I don't know when it's going to happen, but realistically it's putting 10 or 11 teams together. Well, probably going to have an even number, splitting them into 2 groups that are equally as cutthroat as the other, and 2 to 3 come out, or it's a Champions League format style. That's what's going to happen probably eventually. Don't see it happening in the next couple of years, but it is going to happen eventually. There's calls at the moment. When you hear calls for the 4th in Munster to play the 3rd in Leinster, that's so messy, but that's kind of where we are at the minute, just given how.
But that would be better a wild card weekend. I mean, they have it in all the
sports.
Well,
it's ultimately the nonsense of the Leinster Championship. Like Galway is far more, in terms of location, all that is far more in tune with Clare hurling. Like Galway playing in Innes, Galway playing in Limerick is just down the road. Galway's rivals are basically in Kilkenny and Wexford, which are essentially miles away. So like it is an anachronism as it is anyway.
Yeah, it is a bit mad when you think about Galway travelling to play Wexford as it did last year, or even Wexford travelling to play Galway. Like you're travelling, 2/3 of the country to play somebody that's within your own province. Do you know what I mean? It is a bit mad. We also have Antrim Antrim make a ridiculous trip down to Wexford Park this weekend, and I know he talked about Wexford and Dublin fighting out for that third spot, but they've kind of ruffled a few feathers already last weekend. They should have beaten Dublin up in Corrigan Park, and they'll half fancy their chances going down to Wexford Park at the weekend as well. That's lit up Leinster a small bit. If they hadn't done that, it would probably be predictable enough, and you're just waiting for the result of Dublin and Wexford to see who gets third. But that has definitely made it more interesting, allied to the fact that Lee Chin and Damien Reck didn't play last weekend. And I was just looking at GA going, I was looking at Darragh Egan chatting to Chin, and he has an AC joint injury in his shoulder, and you're just thinking they're 4 or 5 down. Will I bring him in, or will I make sure that he's 20 or 30% better off next weekend when we have like a serious banana skin coming down to Wexford Park?
Yeah, look, if he's fit, it's a complete game changer for them for all sorts of reasons in that game against Antrim. I do want to just ask you about the John Kiely anger in the aftermath of the game, where he's talking about the bullshit that was spoken about Limerick. I can see his points, but I do also think that that's just the price of being successful. And I suspect that the message that he was giving out was as much for his own players as it was for the media and everybody else. Like, it's not going to stop people saying Limerick are still overwhelming short price favourites to be the All-Ireland champions this year, and actually they probably got exactly what they wanted from the game at the weekend.
Oh, Sunday was the perfect scenario, wasn't it? They won a game that they should have lost, and they've got all the ramifications of losing a big game. The stick that Kiely has to beat them with now, but they didn't actually lose the game. The aura is still there. Limerick can win playing that badly, putting up a tally that they hadn't put, like a paltry tally that they hadn't put up in years, with 14 men against a team that are flying, and a team that looked to, like on that day, looked to have them tactically figured out. So to me, it's the perfect situation for Kiely. It was an unusual one. We were only chatting on the throw-in pod in the Indo yesterday. We were just saying it's not something that Cody would have done. Cody wouldn't have made any reference to, anything that was being said, or it wouldn't have even said that any bit of it had seeped into his camp. So it was interesting to hear that as well. But just a bit, that's probably a bit of frustration, because you're trying to almost cocoon your players, and you have people saying that they're going to win 6 in a row before they've even poked the ball to win 4 in a row. And those are just the little elements of complacency that you just do not want to set into your camp. They're disastrous consequences within your camp if they do set in. And I think it's the perfect scenario for them. And as well as that, tactically, as I said, it looked like Waterford figured him out, and Davy Fitz deserves huge credit, and he gets his criticism from me included. But he obviously had planned that down to the nth degree, and they just couldn't put the ball over the bar with the chances that they had. They should have realistically gotten something out of that game. And Paul Kinnerk is going to be so frustrated with this idea of that somebody hasn't figured out, and now they're going to be thinking, okay, every team we play are going to adopt similar tactics to Waterford did on Sunday. What are we going to do to counteract that? And what they do to counteract it is going to be fascinating.
I thought Kilkenny had tried to do that in the league final, and Limerick had just thought their way around it. Whereas obviously with the step up from Waterford, maybe it's just the fact that it was the Munster Championship, I don't know. And obviously it wasn't the full Kilkenny side. But it looked like whatever physicality Kilkenny had brought, Waterford had taken it to a slightly higher level, which maybe they're one of the few teams, maybe Galway are also capable of doing that, are they?
There was a couple of things that they did. Nicky Quaid has obviously got the ball in his hand 40 to 45 times per game. Every time he looked up, Waterford had somebody standing in one of the wings, particularly Hegarty's wing. He literally could not puck the ball down that wing. They refused to give Barry Nash any sharp puck out. So it's mad. They deemed Sean Finn the lesser of the playmakers in the full back line. They refused to let Barry Nash get any ball from the sharp puck outs. They almost gave it to Finn and would take the consequences of whatever he did with the ball. I remember at one stage, and Shane Dowden highlighted on the Sunday game, Desi Hutchinson was just basically tracking Nash's run. They refused to let him get ahead up a steam, and Limerick's a lot of options that they would normally have, they didn't have on Sunday. Kilkenny tried some things in the league final, but it was in a different stratosphere of what Waterford were doing the other day. And it's just unfortunate from their respect that they emptied themselves and have nothing to show for it, and have to get themselves back up for a team that didn't play in the opening weekend against when they play Cork this weekend now. So that's going to be a fascinating one.
The minute or minute and a half between the penalty miss and Hegarty sending off, I thought was just amazing. And I was only watching it here. The intensity of the tackling, and I think that's kind of been a little bit lost in the second yellow, because tackles were absolutely flying in. The crowd was going wild, and the Waterford fans were really, really, getting behind them. And there's obviously this animosity almost towards Limerick now, that Limerick are so good that you want to take them down, but that intensity, I'm not trying to exonerate Hegarty, but there were so many tackles going in at that time, and you do wonder now, he is a bit of a marked man in terms of the yellow cards and the reds that he's getting.
Yeah, the intensity was something else, Johnny. Yeah, it's kill or be killed out there now. If you stand back, you're a dead man walking, basically. It's funny, Hegarty's first yellow was for Moughton at the referee, which I'm sure to be very disappointed with, because if it was another robust tackle or something like that, you'd say fair enough. He got 2 yellows. Now the tackle on Conor Gleeson for the second yellow, he creamed him. There
were nearly 2 reds in 10 seconds there,
Yeah, that was borderline. That was, if there was something between yellow and red, that was probably it. And then we had the whole hoo-ha with the Waterford mentor coming down and getting involved, which is just he made a point. He moved a fair distance to get involved, which is just, there's no place for that. But Limerick hit the next 3 points after the sending off. Their ability to react and adapt mid-game is unparalleled. And just on this, I don't know if you follow the boxing much, boys, but at the time De La Hoya nearly beat Mayweather, all the talk was that he had the blueprint to beat him, and it was just, I think it was a split decision points defeat or something like that. So everybody thinks now that Waterford have showed the blueprint to beat Limerick, and I just think it's fascinating.
Dangerous.
Yeah, very, very dangerous. And if it's a sort of idea where people think, we can just copy exactly what Waterford did and we're going to get the same results, they're going to get a rude awakening come the next couple of weeks.
Speculation in the papers this morning that the Seamus Flanagan incident was dealt with at the time, that they thought it was accidental, and that he is therefore going to be free to play this weekend.
Yeah, I was chatting to Colm Keys about this yesterday. Colm is always really good in these scenarios. He's got great contacts, and he talks to people about what's going on there. But apparently that was dealt with or spoken about at the time, so it's not something that they didn't see. Right. So it was spoken about at the time, and by all accounts, the conversations now mid-game are all recorded as well. The way he described it was to me, it's like the black box on an airplane. You can go back and hear everything that was said during the game. So essentially, that seems to be dealt with. It's not something that they missed and can be looked back at retrospectively now. And by all accounts, Declan Hannon, who kind of limped off, he's going to miss probably their next 2 games anyway, and might be back for the Cork game with a groin injury as well. They have great panel depth and squad depth, but at the end of the day, they don't have a player like him that can be the quarterback and orchestrate things. So how they react in his absence will be interesting too.
The worry for John Kiely might be just that it seeps into the narrative now, and it seeps into referees' heads that Limerick are playing on the edge. They're also so physically big that if the likes of Kyle Hayes just mistimes a tackle very, very marginally, he could just leather a fella without even trying. And if that seeps in, John Kiely doesn't really want to be engaged when you're down to 14 men for nearly a second half.
Oh God, no, definitely not. And if you look at Hayes already has a red from the league, and as does William O'Donoghue. So if they were to pick up reds again, they'd actually miss 2 games, which would have disastrous consequences, particularly if it was from the Munster final onwards. Now, this is not a new narrative. It's been out there for a while. But given the size of them, there is a duty of care when you're going in tackling someone that's 5'10", you're 6'5". If you meet them, what should be shoulder to shoulder, if it was 6'5" on 6'5", is not shoulder to shoulder, and you could decapitate them. So there's definitely a duty of care on them there. But I don't think this narrative is anything new. And generally, the last few years, it's been said, Hegarty needs to be careful or he'll get a red come championship. The reds in championship have been few and far between, to be fair. I know Hegarty was sent off against Clare last year, and he kind of really minded himself thereafter while still being robust enough. So I think it'll just help them probably reset a small bit and maybe realise They're probably even more marked men than they thought beforehand.
That's why I think it's perfect for them in a way that they completely underperformed. They still get through the game.
Like, it kind of looked like they were going to win to me as well, even at 14 men. I know, like, Lost Leeds had a good goal chance. But other than that, like, they were essentially leading the whole game, like, and they kind of had them at 3-4 points for nearly the entire second half as well. They had them at arm's length, I thought.
Yeah, I think this is their slowest or lowest scoring return since the 2019 All-Ireland semi-final. Like, this is very low in comparison to what they're used to. They missed a penalty that Galan would rarely miss. Galan missed a goal chance that he would rarely miss. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just a lot of things happened in this game and Limerick still won.
Sorry, Galan should get the penalty. Then there isn't the red card because it was a follow-on, and then that would have been like 6 or 7 points, game over, like.
Yeah. So, like, I just think there's a lot of things happen in this game that will not happen again.
Yeah, and look, on the other side, I saw several people complaining that it was square ball for the penalty, and so therefore it should have been a free out, and you know, and like the missed free on the other end. So I can see if you're making a case for both teams to make the case. It's just that they do need to step up their performance. They have proven in the past that they're able to step up their performance even within games. So that's why this week's game is really fascinating. Clare are very much up against it, and they've caused their own problems with the goalkeeping issues last week.
Yeah, like, at the end of the day, we've probably all been in games or watched games where you're just thinking, you make a couple of mistakes and you're always chasing. You're just always chasing, and they're always there. That was always the difference, and you have to feel sorry for Eamon Foodie, because I looked at him playing Munster League this year. I looked at him playing League as well. He's a very good keeper. It was a difficult kind of ball that came in from Jason Ford's sideline, and it's just several different things added on to it. Like that sharp puck out that he took and took the return. Probably when you're after making a mistake earlier in the game, you probably just go along. You probably just play safe in that scenario and get your confidence back up. And then there was the puck out to Conlon as well. I wasn't sure if he was going to be hauled off at half time. So in fairness to Brian Lohan, he stuck with him. But that was the only difference between the two teams, lads. Clare were brilliant at times. It was just those mistakes were always there. There'll be no problem with them trying to get up for playing Limerick in the Gaelic grounds on Saturday evening. I can guarantee you that. That obviously Connacht was with Clare 10 years ago when they won the All-Ireland. Angus O'Brien, who's with Limerick now, was with Clare as well. Alan Cunningham is a Clare native too. The rivalries either side of the Shannon are massive, and I don't think they'll have any problem getting up for them. And they drew with them 3 times last year. It took extra time for Limerick to beat them in the Munster final. And I don't think Saturday is do or die in a sense for Clare. I think they can still get through if they beat Waterford and Cork. They can still get through potentially on 4 points. Like, they're not going to think that going into Saturday night, and they'll leave everything out there. But I still think they can get through in third and 4 points. Yeah,
you wouldn't be terribly surprised if this game was a draw again. Any Punchestown tips for us, Michael? Before we
I always think Punchestown is kind of a tricky one. You're kind of gauging some of the Cheltenham runners and how much it's taken out of them. I just tend to, like, how many odds on favourites have we today and tomorrow and over the next couple of days? I tend to go for something that goes in a bit fresh. Like, Gentleman Demise going against an Ergumen today. You couldn't see an Ergumen been beaten, but then you have a fresh horse coming in against a horse that, you know, had fair exertions at Cheltenham. I like Emmett's horse in the novice chase. Actually, Willie has 4 in it. What's the pronunciation, John? Ferranilli, is it?
Ferranilli,
yeah. He's actually ran in a bumper. He's ran over hurdles and he's done chases all within the space of 4 months, which has to be unheard of.
His first one over hurdles was in a grade 2. His first one over fences was a month later in a senior graded chase. Yeah. My last question for you, though, before Ger rudely interrupted, because we haven't even spoken about Galway.
Well, we're out of time.
Out of time. One word: who's the biggest rival to Limerick this year?
Themselves.
Oh,
that's good. That's a good answer.
Platonic. Very good. Wow. Bring in the philosophy. Good stuff, Michael.
Thanks, gents.
That is a good answer.
Michael Verney there.